Roll call, we got everybody except the master leader, Luke's and Ashley. All of them has to be excused. We look for a motion to approve the November 7th agenda. Second by Yanti. Any discussion on the agenda? All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. Approval of October 4th, 2022 minutes. Poppy moves. Second? No second. To approve the minutes.
Second.
Augustine, any discussion on the minutes? All right, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Public comment. Does anybody wish to speak to the committee? Anybody wish to speak? Everybody just came out to enjoy the meeting tonight. Anybody wish to speak? Very well then. We will move on. Administrators report.
Yes, in the personnel report that you have in front of you, as you can see, we have retirements, job changes. I do want to make you aware that there is another, well, there's a couple, this was printed prior to the changes happening. As you are likely aware, we have a second highway worker opening due to the untimely passing of Dana Lemons. We also have a position opening in IT due to the resignation of Kevin Donlin. So those are two items that are not on this personnel report, but have happened and are on later in this agenda. So,
Right.
and as for jail cook, we have a person, but we have not started the training yet for them. And I think that's most of everything. If there's questions, I can try to answer them, or if it's about specific departments, if the department head is here, they can probably answer it as well.
Any questions? All right. Moving on.
So the update in the jail staffing, I had put in as we had, the sheriff's department had done some interviews. As you see, we have one that we're going to fill right away because there was a position vacancy that had been approved. And as you see, we're looking at getting other employees or candidates into the queue within 2023. We will continue to also do an eligibility list as well, but we're moving forward as we had stated to the committee previously. If there's other questions, I am sure that Chief Deputy Baser can probably answer them.
Any questions? All right, moving on. Approval to fill vacancies. A, Family and Community Services Unit Manager and subsequent vacancies, Human Services.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is similar to, we're in a similar situation that we had when a couple, 2-3 years ago when Dave Cornelius had retired as the Chief Deputy. And we knew that how we usually do our filling of that vacant position is we went from the Chief Deputy, which would be posted internally, be filled internally, which would therefore lead to a vacancy, which would likely be filled internally, which would then lead to another vacancy, which would be filled internally, which would mean that you'd have essentially only one vacancy. It just would be their cascading. And in my memo, I explained this, is that what is the tentative plan is that as I had explained to you previously, that on January 1, Melissa Anoy will be taking on the Human Services Director position, which means her unit manager position in Family and Community Services would become open. It is our intent then to have Corinne Conkle move over from the Youth and Families unit over to the Family and Community Services unit, which would then leave her position open, of which it would be our intent to have Chad LaLuzerne move into that position, which would leave his position open, of which we believe there would be a lateral transfer from one of those other units into the Youth and Families position, which eventually, with all of that, it's still only one position that is vacant that we would be asking to be filled. So But instead of each time there being a vacancy, coming back to the committee and asking for permission to fill the vacancy, we're requesting that we be able to fill the first vacancy, which would be Ms. Banoy's position, and all subsequent vacancies that result from those positions being filled. If there's other questions, I can try to answer them. Is that understandable to the committee? I didn't confuse anyone.
Any questions on it? All right, so we would seek a motion. Motion to fill the
There was a
position.
position for Melissa Andor, correct?
And the subsequent vacancies.
All right,
Second,
second. Further discussion. Supervisor Romden.
just a comment, this issue was discussed at our last human services committee meeting, and the committee supports this process.
This is just one position though, correct?
Correct. Again, very similar to the sheriff's department, that what happens is that one position,
I
now
understand how it went, but
It's only one.
One position.
it's only one is A. When we get to B, that is a completely different position, which is not part of this.
Thank you.
All right, any other discussion? All in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, caseworker, youth and families unit.
Yes,
Services.
we have been notified by Rhonda Rummel that she will be retiring. Is it January or December? I think it's January of 2023. So there will be a vacancy for that position. Again, to kind of stay on top of things, we know that the position will become vacant and therefore asking that that position be filled. This again is not the creation of a new position, it's the filling of an existing position.
All right, are there any questions? We have a motion.
I make a motion to fill the position with Rhonda Rummel. Second that one.
Second by Augustine. Further discussion? All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Highway worker, ×2.
Yes, we have now, we have one vacancy and one soon-to-be vacancy. I forget who the person is going to be retiring again. Keith Puplum. That was on your personnel report. So again, we will be filling what are current positions, not new positions. It's important that we, again, fill these positions for road construction, for winter maintenance and the like. So again, asking for the positions to be filled.
Questions or a motion?
Do we have an eligibility list for that yet?
You asking me?
Yeah.
We're in the process.
We're in the process of
advertising.
it. I think Friday is the,
And it's happened, Aaron, since our last committee meeting.
All right, very good.
I'll make a motion, we fill the two positions.
Motion by Supervisor Poppy. Is there a second? Supervisor Yonke, second. Further discussion? All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Help desk, GIS support, IT.
Yes, this is one that had just recently come about, and I will let Mr. Loyne speak about it in just a moment. Kevin Donlin, who's been with us for a couple years now, he had made us aware that he has accepted an offer, at least at this present time, with the city of Green Bay at the rate of $30.14 an hour. He does live in De Pere, which therefore requires less commute, and that whole issue. We will be looking to try to fill that position. Again, we will probably have to look at wage scale and duties, but I would prefer instead to have Mr. Loining kind of give the background as to the position and the vacancy.
So, like Administrator Felton said, Kevin Donlin has resigned. His last day was the 23rd of November. He cited that competitive wage was one of the major reasons for accepting another position. He liked working for Kewaunee County and wanted to continue to work for Kewaunee County, but it didn't make sense for him to continue to commute with the raising prices and things like that. Also, the IT world has exploded with the wage increases for individuals with IT knowledge. We invested 3 years into Kevin with training and different things like that. So he's going to the city of Green Bay, and he's going to be basically performing a very similar job that he was doing here, just the IT work without the GIS portion on top of that. So tried to convince him to stay. He just was not able to do it with the current wage that it's set. So,
What is the current wage?
I believe his current wage is right now is it 2303 or 2463?
I think it's 23.
All right. Any questions for Mr. Loining or Mr. Felt on this? What happens to the GIS in the meantime?
Well, we would have to then contract out with that. We do contract out right now with Harris Associates for the more difficult splits. We would then just have to contract with Harris to do the simple splits as well.
Did we not raise that wage up sometime back by quite a bit
Uh,
when we included the GIS?
Yes, we did, but it's not competitive. And so if the committee wishes to revisit the wage scale, they can do that. Otherwise, we can try to also change, and been having some conversations with Mr. Loining, is do we have it be a help desk support, or do we just make it an IT specialist position and therefore try to have a more competitive wage scale as well?
An IT specialist incorporates help desk, but also does within 6 months of help desk, you're being trained for other duties as well. Because the hope was the individual will become more of my backup, so when I'm gone, he can handle a lot of the duties that I can do. So instead of just help desk, he's doing more IT, becoming more of an IT specialist, which is a different wage scale than the help desk.
I seem to recall that we looked at these wages when we reviewed this with the GIS, and we looked at other counties of our size.
We did.
And we were indeed competitive. When we compared, compared to the city of Green Bay, okay, but compared to other counties in similar situations, we were very competitive.
A lot of things have happened in 3 years.
All right, do we have a motion?
I think motion to fill the IT help desk position.
And that's, your motion is with GIS support in it as well as is, as it currently is, as the position currently exists.
May I, Mr. Chair?
Mhm.
If it please the committee, what we could do is we could hold off or delay the filling of this vacancy and let Mr. Loining and I put together a job description and wage scale for the IT specialist position and present that to the committee for consideration. And if they feel that that is a position that should be recruited as opposed to the help desk position, then the committee would have the opportunity, whether they wanted the IT specialist position filled or whether they wanted to remain with the help desk GIS.
They have a wage scale that was approved not that long ago. You can do it once, but I think it would be better to go ahead and try to fill it as is.
Are we gonna continue? If we would do Mr. Feld's option, are we gonna continue to have the GIS work done by Ayers Associates and not fill that position?
Not theirs, is it?
I'm sorry, Rupert, okay, thank you, I apologize. Thank you, Michelle. Is,
Or are we gonna be coming back in a month or two asking for a GIS support position?
it would hopefully be my intent that we could try, depending on talking with Mr. Loining, to see if we could have GIS support within that IT specialist position. But again, that's where we can bring that forward and then the committee can decide what direction they would like to go.
Having the GIS in there was some of the basis for increasing the scale.
Correct?
I did raise the issue when we were going to hire and come up with a wage that before we dropped GIS into the equation, that the average help desk specialist with wage was $22 to $23 an hour. When this individual was brought on to do GIS work as well, we raised it by $1, which if you look at both positions, it wasn't real competitive in the market at that time either. But
I think it was competitive. We did look at other counties of our size. If you compare to larger counties, it was not competitive. But in comparison to similar entities, I seem to recall that it was. All right, do we have a motion? What do you want to do?
There is a motion, there is not a second.
I didn't hear the motion.
The motion from Supervisor Rompton was to fill the help desk GIS support position.
Okay, so it would be as is. Is there a second to it?
I'll second it.
All right,
We need
Supervisor Yankee, second. Further discussion? All right, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Administrative Assistant, Veteran Services. This was tabled from the last time. Supervisor Poppy.
If everybody read the minutes, it showed that October 4th, the October 4th meeting, I had made a proposal to fill that spot and rescinded that motion because there was to be more information coming out, and we have the clerk here tonight. So there were some questions asked that I believe that if it was to take down some information to help the officer in charge as far as setting up meetings or whatever it was, would that be a possibility?
Well,
I know your work.
I talked to Melissa about what happens when nobody's down there currently. Basically, they come down to the desk and get the information.
I mean, is that workable? I mean, I don't know how many people come in, a week or a month or whatever,
Idea?
Well, I guess
And
to
the
start
day,
out, then
20
Rob,
a
you can
day.
correct us if we're wrong. So Rob now has signs that says, on this day, he has appointments, this day, he has open office hours, I believe.
Correct.
And as he, if something comes up and he's running late or something, he lets us know. So if people are coming in, because we are the first office, we are the heart. So if people do just randomly come in, if they see that, or, you can see they're wandering around and there's nowhere they are. But, so we'll always we have his business cards. Rob has been great with that and, give them the information that way.
How many a week? How many a day? How many a week?
Oh. I don't know, to be honest. I would say it's not all that, like I said, I think the information is out there now, and correct me if I'm wrong. Initially, when it was, because Tara was always here, but then obviously she wasn't. And then I think it was just that transition period where people know, maybe know now that they have to call ahead or do, again, I don't know, and I don't want to put words, in Rob's thing. We get people and we just hand out the cards and, or take information, but really not even take information. We just say, here's Robert, or we'll email him. This is my understanding. Yeah, so, anything more than that, I think we're in agreement that our offices really can't take any on, but, we're happy to do that. We do it for human services. We're constantly bringing people people downstairs and public health and do whatever. Peter. So,
Fast.
At this
yeah,
point,
yeah.
I would, I'd make the recommendation, we do not fill that position.
That's a motion.
Motion.
Do you, so I did do some talking to a couple people since I'm chair. And there are, some veterans that have been going to another county. And we got a new system in to help Robert out. Was that last month or the month prior? September maybe?
We're still, it was this month,
That we,
October.
yes, to help things out when he has to search for veterans information. The only problem I have, and I was looking if we could do something possibly part-time, was I don't want to, I've been told from veterans, and 2 of them are in our mind committee, that veterans, when they don't want to ask, and when they do have to ask, it's because they want something, but they're not people to go out and just ask for anything. So I don't want to see it where they come into this building and they do not get help. So that's my only concern is if Robert is not available or they come by use and then they leave. So I was looking at possibly if we could do something part-time. We also are looking at getting transportation. And that is something that we've been working on already last year. It's looking at grants, right? Scott helped me out if we were looking at some grants where we could help with transporting some of these veterans. We do have the vehicles here to do that. So the people on my committee have also been looking into that, and that was part of if we had a part-time position, that when Robert does transport these people more, then that part-time position would be there, so that it's not vacant.
So I
You
have,
do the transportation part of it?
No, they would be in the office, so Robert could do the transportation, because there are veterans that they can't get to where they have to get.
we have a motion. Is there a second?
May I will speak to the board
Just
or the
wait,
committee?
I have.
just wait.
Is there a second to the motion? No second, so there's no action. So what does board wish to do? The motion's
I
been
would like
tabled
to-
previously.
I would like to look into this more, if it's possible, if I could have a little help with Scott. There is a gentleman on my committee, Jeff, who has been talking with me, and we have some ideas. But this is a very important, I reached out to Tara, I wanted to know what her job was, what she all did, and she was very busy. There was times where she could not get to the veterans, but some of them got her number and they called her personally. So I do not want to leave these people, I don't want to be known as a county that we left our veterans. And so I'm looking at anything possible that we could make work, and if I
How
could,
do other counties that are larger than ours manage with only a one-person department?
I only looked into Door County, and I did reach out to Door County, and Door County said right now it is very tough. She can't get to all the veterans. So I'm not saying, boom, we're gonna go higher, but I would really like to look into this first a little further. And see what options we have. I'm not looking at a full-time, we're looking at a part-time, but we also have been doing this for probably a year now. About this transportation of transporting veterans. And we have gotten, I think you've gotten a couple leads on some grants, correct, Scott?
We have done something before. We can work with, whether it's through human services or whether it's with something towards with Door County or some type of item in that respect. Yeah, we can continue to try to look at that. Just for the education of the committee, when we talk about FTEs working in the County Veteran Services Office, the vast majority, except for roughly half a dozen, and those are smaller counties than ours, have only one FTE in their Veteran Service Office. Most all of them have two or more.
Mr. Starnes, how much of this is online now compared to what it was even 5 years ago or 10 years ago?
So with our transition, we just finished transitioning most of our records online. In fact, they're still processing those right now, doing the naming convention for those. So a lot of it has transferred online. All the stuff that goes to VA now and to different agencies is all done digitally. Everything is done digitally. The only time we do paper is when we do records reviews. And those vary by size, depending on the veteran itself. And back in the back, I bring in some examples to show you different sizes of different veteran cases. So to answer your question, right now we are at about 80% digitally all together. Once this is done, and in January, I will transition to the new program once those records are all migrated.
But Mr. Sternstein,
What will that do to the workload of the department?
It doesn't.
that's
It doesn't negate the workload, sir. So it changes it. So now before, like where Tara would be all the copies and then she would put it into a file. Now all those documents that come in are being then digitally uploaded into the different veterans files. So although the work just transforms, does it save time? I would say in the last 3 months that I've been doing the casework and doing it all myself, I'd say it cuts it down by about a quarter, but you're still having to go through and scan each individual document and then upload it into Vetrospec and then to VA itself.
How's the workload been with just one person in the office? It's been how long now?
Since the end of July, sir.
I'm going to clarify for just a moment. The difference between electronic and paper is just what the medium is. You still have to conduct the interview. You still have to review the files. If you're making an appeal, you still have to meet with the adjudicator online. A lot of that stuff is now is done, but the files are not having to be faxed. They're already on Vetrospec, so those files and those documents can be accessed electronically as opposed to otherwise. But as for the work of meeting with veterans, researching what the claims are and doing that type of work, that doesn't matter whether it would have been paper or would have been electronic. That amount of work still remains the same.
As far as workload, sir, my workload has been very consistent and a little overwhelming sometimes. There is stuff that I had put off to the side, i.e. like the obituaries and stuff like that. Not saying they're not getting done. Those paperwork are done, but the ordering the plaques and stuff like that has just been because they're not going to install until springtime anyway. So those go and get put off to whenever I have a down day in order to do those catch-up days. My call volume is still on the increase and on the rise. So is my emails and my digital meetings with the VA. Without Tara there, it becomes, and most of my veterans that have come in the last 3 months can tell you I've had veterans sitting in the office waiting for an hour to 2 hours, just waiting to see me because my calendar is booked. And there's days that I don't have any at all, but those are the days I do my research in order to do the claims and do it correctly. So my request from you guys is I don't see, if you look at the documents that I sent you, which shows the tasks that Tara normally did, and that's not, I took all the claims part out of that and just left that alone, because all I'm asking for is administrative assistant in order to do the records upkeeping. The obituary searches, those are the daily tasks. Those things that are still there, but then I have meetings that start at 8 o'clock, sometimes start at 7 o'clock in the morning and go all the way until 6 o'clock at night. I also don't know if you all had a chance to review all of that. I did send you the taskings. I also did send you the breakdown by timeline as far as each individual, like how long each task take. Right now for the year, I only have 6 hours in the week to do other additional tasks. Those additional tasks which aren't tracked on this tracker because this is what the committee asked us for. So those are the burial plaques that are being done, the educational benefits that are being asked for, the CRSC for our combat veterans who are being asked for, retirement packets that are being required, Champ VA applications. None of that is on that sheet that shows you the timelines. This is just the bare bones. This is what our office is doing. And I only have 6 hours for additional tasks throughout the week.
Questions, discussion, motion?
I don't know.
Supervisor Romden.
I don't know if anybody else on the committee has gotten any calls from veterans. I have gotten a few. And one of the things that they feel is important is to at least have somebody in that office, whether it's 5 days a week or 3 days a week, but somebody in there when Rob is not there that can give them general information that they're looking for. They may not specifically need to see Rob, but they need some type of information that they're looking for. And in the past, I know Tara was able to provide that information. The other thing is that I think it's a good idea that the committee is really going to take a serious look at this. And I think that's a good idea for you guys to do that. Many other situations in other departments, when issues arise, I think this committee and the board itself takes a lot of, they put a lot of weight on what the committee is recommending. And I think that's an important thing here, especially with having veterans on your committee. I think that would probably be a good idea to come back after your committee's had a chance to look at this and make a formal request.
You said that you had sent us the breakdown of the position.
Yes, sir. On the document that Scott sent out, it was the, hold on, I gotta bring it back up. Just give me a second.
Where was that document?
Is this it, Rob?
No, there was another one.
Veteran service administrative assistant.
Yeah, I'm seeing characteristic work of the position. Is that what you're referring to? Example of duties?
Yes.
Example of duties
So those are the tasks.
and qualifications. No, that doesn't give me a breakdown though. That's what I was asking about. The reference the breakdown of, maybe I misunderstood. You break down the amounts of time on the.
Document that shows the timeline, sir, that, which is. I can take it over to you. man.
You have a
I don't
copy of
have
it?
I don't have it.
Characteristic work of the position. Okay. Those are.
This was in the, things you got tonight. It was after the character. And then there's these, and I did it for the last 4 years to show you the breakdown. And what I did was I went through and put the claims for it.
Okay.
2019, 2020.
Yeah, I got it. Thank
Yeah, so that gives you the timeline breakdown. Those timelines are taken straight from the VA. And the calls are, I picked 5.67 minutes. That's straight from the National Call Center. How long it takes to talk to a veteran. Some phone calls are more than that. Some phone calls are less than that. But that's the average if you average them all together. Those are my timelines.
All right, what does the committee wish to do?
Can you come back to our committee, to the Veterans Committee, which is next Tuesday? Next Monday, I'm sorry.
We can limit on table, we can still table the motion or just not take action, right, Mr. Dickfall? It was tabled, or it was, according to you, it was rescinded, so we can simply leave it.
It was, the initial motion was failed for lack of second.
Right.
So what the committee could do if it so chooses is that
This month there was a motion, so that failed, so there's nothing right now.
you don't have to do
So there is
anything.
no action.
And what could happen is, if I'm understanding Supervisor Kroll, I can work with her and the committee to make a recommendation to the executive committee regarding the position. And there doesn't have to be a time period. So therefore, if for some reason we aren't ready by the December meeting, then we could do it in January. So that way, so for right now, we stay a status quo until there's a recommendation from the Veteran Service Committee or the Executive Committee to take action upon.
Is that acceptable to the committee? Yes. All right, then we'll move on.
I have a question, would it be possible to have like a halftime position, like say you're open on the mornings? I'm just
Of course, is there a possibility? There's always a possibility. The question comes down to is it, will you be able to recruit for it?
True.
So that's the bigger issue, because you could have a quarter position.
What was the rate on this position?
For the administrative assistant, not the claims specialist. Oh, I have on claim. This claims specialist was 2024. So I believe the administrative assistant would be 1849.
So we able to be at that meeting?
Next Tuesday, I believe
No,
so,
it's
yes.
Monday.
Next Monday, possibly.
Ma'am, did you want those, they put on the agenda before sending it out tomorrow?
All right. Any other questions? We'll move on then. Temporary cross-trained union positions ×3, sheriff.
Alrighty, and do you want me to summarize or no?
Well, we have.
It's you guys. Go ahead.
I'll kick it off. I know Jason put a lot of work into this and he's been trying to write the language. But it's on the statement to the sort of the narrative, I believe, on the last 2 pages of what you're sent out electronically. So as we continue to move down the planning for the new jail and speaking with both the jail inspector, the architect, basically the general practice as far as how you transition into a new facility is you get what's called, or you establish what's called a transitional team. So you typically try to find those folks that have operational awareness within the jail facility. In this case, we've got some great folks. We have some folks that actually have come to us from other facilities, from other counties that have a pod system. So their intel, right, their information boots on the ground is very valuable. We also have deputies that are senior, that have experience in policy and training. That's what's going to be required, because as we get closer, as we start this process, we're not just going to all of a sudden wait to be handed the keys. We've got a very deliberate and extensive process by which we have to develop brand new policy for how we're going to operate this facility, as well as training up these officers so that when we do get handed the key, we're going to be able to make that transition smoothly. So what we run into, and we want to make sure that we're, again, getting the best people on this committee or on this transitional team without hindering their careers. We've got folks that are senior in the jail that ultimately are going to be wanting to transition to patrol. But if for our sake, if they're doing us a solid, saying, no, we're going to be part of this transitional team for you, we don't want to hinder their careers, really what it is. Because if we then skip them, which is what would happen, they're going to stay in the jail, and then the next people up are going to jump into patrol. They're literally sort of, what do you want to say, retracting or diminishing their ability then to move forward. So what we're asking for is during the transitional period, allowing them to sort of get into queue, because you've got that union, non-union environment, in order to get them into queue so that they, once the building's done, they can get right back in where they would have fallen in place. We just are looking for temporary protective status for 3 positions. It may only require 2. You know, as we look at this and how many people we put on the transitional team or which one of our current staff, we may only actually need this to apply to 2. But if we, you know, if we need the 3, at least we'll have covered that base. And as soon as the jail is built and we transition in, those 3 protective status positions go away. They go away through attrition. They no longer exist. So we're not asking for anything permanent. All we're asking is an effective tool to make sure that we get the best people on this transitional team. And in doing so, we're not hindering their future career. That's sort of the nuts and bolts of it. But again, I want to turn over to Jason because he's put a lot into this in case I missed anything.
What's the length of time on this?
So we're looking at probably starting, they recommend that when they break ground is when you start the transitional team, is when you start to really focus on policy. When you start looking at, it's not just policy development, but they actually want these folks in on these meetings, looking at how are these plans developing, because they're the ones that are going to understand, hey, at 2 a.m, when we bring an inmate in, what's that going to look like? What's that going to feel like, right? So they are going to be in on the process, probably as soon as we start breaking ground. Then there's an expectation from the jail inspector and the consultant, the architect, that these folks are part of these meetings so that there's a solid handshake, a solid transition for this new facility.
We have job descriptions on these.
There's actually from the state, they provide what a transitional team does. So there is an actual state document that articulates what a transitional team does.
So these positions are going to exist for these 2 at least positions are going to exist for
Possibly 2 years.
So possibly 2 years. So it's going to take them What are they doing for those 2 years?
As I said, they're in on all the planning meetings, right? So we're continuing to
I
plan.
mean, this is it. This is full time. This is what they do.
Correct. We're actually
2
pulling
years.
them out of the sequence. We're pulling them out of the rotation. And they're the ones that are, I mean, not all the time, but yeah, there are times where they're not gonna be able to fill a shift. They're on the transitional team. So they're gonna be in on the meetings, starting to develop practice, trainings, policies and protocols. So yeah, that is the recommendation. We pull them out of the rotation. That's what typically is done on jail projects. It's something that we're just kind of coming up with. This is something that is historically done in a transition to a new jail
So
facility.
it takes 2 people, 2 years, full time to develop these procedures.
Correct. Because it's
And
not
training.
just developing the it's the training, and it's also being at the meetings and working with the architects and the consultants and the jail inspector, making sure nothing's missed. Because if something gets missed, that's when we start talking about change orders.
Well, that's not our problem if something gets missed. You're implying that there's nothing on the architect. I mean, if I build a house, I don't have to have somebody there full time to make sure that the contractor doesn't make a mistake. The idea being that if he makes a mistake, I'm stuck with it. No, that's his responsibility.
Correct. And that's why they have to be in on these plans early so that we do catch these things, because you're right. Once we start laying concrete, we don't want to find out. So that's where we start early to look at the plans and say, wait a second, why is that wall there? Should that be a half wall? There's a lot of different things that we deal with.
Isn't this what the jail committee has been doing now? For how many hours already?
There's so much more,
I'm not understanding.
there's so much more to it that goes on to, so like, you think, well, you're a jailer, you know how to run the new jail. Yes, jailers know that, like, if there's a problem inside of one of the cells, they gotta get back up before they go in. But everything in that new jail is gonna work different. The person in the pod that's running all the doors needs to be trained in how to run all the doors before the jail opens. It really isn't a 2-year full-time thing. It'll ramp up slowly, more and more busy. So they'll work in the jail for 50% of the time when they first break ground, maybe 70% of the time when they first break ground. But they'll eventually transition into working more and more on this committee where they're setting up policies. They have to look at, like, how are we going to feed the inmates? That's going to be totally different than what we do it now. And they're going to have to come up with policies on that. Okay, the inmates from the upper tier are going to probably come down and get their own lunches. What are they going to do when they have an inmate that can't come down the steps as easily as the others? Or maybe we have to put them in the top tier, but they can't carry their tray. So they'll have to come up with policies for how these things all operate. That's what they're going to be working on for at least a year, full time every day.
With this pod design, there's gotta be some policies out there already that we can, is like a state standard or something like
There
that.
is absolutely.
It sounds like we're creating this all ourselves or in jail. We're not. I
No,
mean,
oh, absolutely not. You got DOC 350 that of course applies. So we got the jail inspector making sure we're in accordance with that. But we are doing things different than any other county, right? Everyone that we toured, every county does certain things differently because of their makeup. The fact that we don't have the courts right with the jail, right? A lot of them have the courthouse right there. So their policy and how they move inmates, ours is gonna be different because we're distant. We're blending the dispatch with the booking duty. That's a whole different set of protocols that no other county has done, right? We did a lot of unique things as we developed this to save on staff. Remember that. When we went from what was requested down to that 5, we're doing a lot of different things. All those different things are gonna take policy. So the matter in front of you isn't whether or not we're gonna have a transitional team. We have to have a transitional team. That's gonna happen. The question is, are we gonna put quality people on that transitional team that are gonna be effective? And to get those quality people that are going to be effective, we have to make sure that we're giving something to get something. We can't just say, well, you know, it's unfortunate that you're going to lose out on future opportunities by helping us, but we just expect you to help us. So it's sort of a give and take, right? So we're not asking for additional positions. We're not asking for things to go on forever. The transitional team, whether we agree with it or disagree with it, that's set forth that there will be a transitional team for this to happen. That's just the way it goes when you move from one facility to another. It's very different from a residential home. We're not going from one residential home. We're going from a jail to a completely different environment. So again, the issue is whether or not we can provide these folks with incentives that they will then assist us, basically put their career goals on hold is what we're asking them to do. And all we're asking is for that transition of that status while they're helping us out. Once this all plays out, everything will go back to normal. But we're just trying to give them some incentive for providing us that assistance.
I wouldn't even call it incentive. I wouldn't, I'm gonna slightly disagree with the sheriff in that it's not an incentive. I would call it a fair trade. Because what would happen is if we have experienced jailer dispatchers coming in, and they're the ones that are gonna help put together policies and train our staff. But then they're given the opportunity to go to the patrol division. If there is no reason for them not to, then I'm gonna do what's best for me and my family, and I'm gonna take the patrol position, which therefore puts the county at a disadvantage, because now I have to bring in someone that wasn't part of the process. We now have to bring them in, and they have to get up to speed, as well as they may not be as experienced as the folks that we want to be doing this.
That implies that they're able to go to the patrol division. Why don't you just use jailers who are just jailers?
That's why we need these union positions, because we're using jailers to start, and we're not giving you a firm number on how many we need of these cross-trained positions, or these union positions. Let's just play it out in our minds, okay? It's easier to show as a person. Chelsea Bean is our most senior sergeant. She recently went to school so that she could work patrol. She would be one of the top candidates to go and set up a new jail with policies and stuff, because she's been in the jail long enough and she really understands how it runs, and she's smart. That's why we promoted her to sergeant. So let's say we put her on that team, and a year from now we have an opening. Chelsea's on that team. If her choice is either I promote to patrol and I'm able to start my seniority there, or I pass it up and I say, well, I'd help the county and pass it up.
Why can't she go to patrol and stay on transition?
Because then our patrol would be one person short, and we maybe could handle one person for
I
a
mean,
little while.
that sounds like that makes a lot more sense to me than unionizing some positions. Let them go to patrol and let them stay on the transition team, because there may be people as dispatchers that will never move to patrol, that'll stay as jailer dispatchers, and they can stay on the transition team. So I don't see why we need to create
put people who are
positions.
going to go to patrol, you know they're gonna go to patrol, so you're going to lose that expertise in the jail. Why do that knowingly?
That's how our whole training program works. That's how Kewaunee County Sheriff's Department is basically based. We start people in the jail. They learn how to talk to inmates. They learn policies on patrol. They learn how to handle calls. And then eventually, when they get enough seniority, they promote out. So what we're asking for these positions for is so that she can promote out, but she would stay in the jail and finish that project. So she's a union position, and now she gains that seniority. If she passed that up, somebody else would go in front of her.
I understand what you're saying.
10 years from now, she wouldn't be able to get days. And if we keep her on that transitional team, because that final year, she's going to be working 100% on the transitional team. Imagine if all three people on the transitional team promoted to patrol, and we let them do that, and we just left those positions open. We would have an enormous amount of overtime from those three positions, plus anybody else that went out on FMLA or anything like that, to compound that problem.
But why not find people who are only going to be jail, who you have some reasonable expectation that they will stay in the jail?
We would have to go so low on seniority that we
They don't have
wouldn't
the
have
expertise.
people that would be very, we like hire, you're saying sort of like hire our last three hires in the jail and make them the transitional team people, because that way we don't have to worry about them promoting to patrol. We could do that. The problem is they have no experience setting up policies, no experience supervising others like our sergeants do. No experience even within the own jail. They're just learning their jobs and trying to get by at that time, at this point. And we would be making them in charge of our $27 million facility.
These people have training in writing policy?
Yes, Chelsea Broomhall, Chelsea Bean definitely has.
What training is that?
She has wrote a lot of the jail policies already and helped Lieutenant Van Herem write those policies.
She's also one of our primary trainers for the jail. So everything that we do on a regular basis, like TASER, like POS, all the things that we do, she's actually doing the training. So it's just natural then. I mean, talent for training that we bring her right into this. Again, it's a natural flow. It makes sense to put people in that have the experience that do. Otherwise, we're literally pulling people in that are barely off probation, barely off training, and we're going to task them with the transitional team responsibilities.
You're going to be there long term.
And we're just using her as an example. It's other people too, and they're not necessarily the most three senior individuals that are going to be on the team. That's definitely not the case. We do have some newer officers that bring a lot to the table because they came from other facilities and they know how things ran well and how things didn't run well at those other facilities. Some of those people will be really good on the transitional team also.
So again, we're just looking for a mechanism, a tool to put the best folks on that transitional team for the best possible outcome for this project. We're looking at spending a significant amount of money. The fiscal impact of this, when you look at it, as far as being successful or not successful in this project, it's minimal, very minimal. So we have to make sure that we're putting the pegs in place to make sure that we are successful. And this is one of those. And there's going to be others as this project goes on. There's things that we're going to do to say, yeah, these are the things that you do to make sure that this goes smoothly. It's just, this is one of those things. And again, if you want to see the duties or the job descriptions, that's actually laid out. There's a document from the Department of Corrections that says this is a transitional team and this is what they do. So we're not just making this up for Kewaunee County. This is a part of a legitimate project.
That's a generic Department of Corrections job description. That does not tell us specifically what these people will be doing. We're being asked to approve 2 positions for 2 years to do nothing but transition, when for much of that, there won't even be a building there.
May I make a suggestion to the committee? We could have the jail inspector come in and explain, since she has been intimately involved in numerous jail construction projects, training, transition, and the like. She could come in and maybe answer some of those questions and why it is a good idea for the transition and what the purpose of the transition team is and the like. And therefore, if there are concerns, that Nancy Thielen can therefore answer those questions probably better as well.
She can certainly provide information, but she is not going to be able to tell us specifically what these positions are going to do here and how you can have 2 positions full-time when there's not even a building for much of it. What are they going to be doing? I don't think that this committee should just approve 2 positions if you don't have. I mean, we just sat here and grilled the Veterans Services officer over what is this position going to be doing, and it's a whole lot less money than this.
I want to make sure to clarify, these positions are not 2 additional positions. They are a modification of current positions.
There are 2 positions that would be doing nothing, potentially nothing but transitional duties, right?
Well, no, as we say, it's starting off, it's going to be a slow, it's a transition, right? So it ebbs and it flows. So we're going to start off, and maybe it's going to be very minimal where they might attend some of the meetings. We're going to have them tour other facilities and shadow with other staff from other facilities to understand the pros and cons, so we have a lot of things that they're going to be doing that are going to ebb and flow.
So we should be able to be given a description of that and what those hours are and that breakdown it is when this ramps up.
And that's all going to be 10 on progress. So we can give you status report, but I don't know that we can forecast that because it all depends on what the status and the progress is of the project. I can't tell you what's going to be doing in May or what's going to be doing in July. All I can do is go off that document and say in the early stages, we're talking about policy. We're talking about, anticipation of training. We're going to be touring other facilities. Once the ground is dug, now you're actually possibly boots on the ground. It's going to change as the project changes. So nobody, I don't think, is going to be able to give you a minute by minute, hour by hour, day by day of what these folks should be doing. And again, we're not looking for new positions. All we're looking for is a status change to give them some assurances that in helping us, they're not hindering their career goals. And we do want to have the senior people on there. I mean, to bring somebody in that just got off for training and say, okay, you're going to help develop policy. I mean, we're inviting disaster. So we're looking at the best people for the job is what we should always be doing. And in this case, these folks have other career paths that we want to respect. Maybe they'll change their mind. Maybe as this is going, like, wow, this new jail is exciting, I might just stay in the jail. We don't know. There's so many things that could change. So to ask about what's going to happen at step 5042, when we haven't even kicked it off, I don't know that anybody can answer it. I agree with Scott. I think having the jail inspector to give assurances that, again, this is normal protocol. This isn't anything that any of the county hasn't pursued. And again, we're not looking for fresh positions. All we're looking for is a change of status. Because as we get the new positions that we're hiring, right, and we're slowly ramping it up, they're gonna backfill these people then, right? Because there was that concern of why we're hiring all these people right away. And we said during that conversation, because we have to pull people out for transitional team, and those new people then will be able to fill those shifts so that we can effectively do a transitional team. So we've had this conversation, we've discussed this and how it plays into the project. But again, if you're looking for more assurances, I agree with Scott, let's bring the jail inspector to say, hey, this is why we do it. This isn't the first time, but yeah, absolutely. I want to give you folks every assurance that you need, but I don't want to mislead you in thinking that I'm going to be able to lay out on a piece of paper everything that's going to be done by the week or by the day or by the month, because it's all going to depend on necessity.
So can I just ask a question? So you talked about this lady who would be a candidate. So if we were, let's just say this happened tonight, she does not take that position till whenever ground breaks, which is next year, or, okay?
Not even that, till
So
there's an
she's doing her
opening.
normal job. Let's say she's in the jail here. Then when she takes on that position, that's where her incentive comes in.
No,
she's just
she might
taking-
actually still pursue it, and if there's not a road opening, she's still operating as a jailer. All we're talking about, when an opening arrives, with some of the retirements we have coming up,
Yep.
then if she wants to pursue that opening, she can continue to work on the transitional team, hold that spot, right? Because she'll be in the queue. She can then basically take advantage of that opening and say, yes, I'm interested, we're gonna go through the process. I'm gonna stay on the transitional team, but now she's locked herself into that seniority. Otherwise, she would literally have to just say, sorry, somebody gets in front of me now.
Who's gonna fill that spot? In the year and a half she's on the transition team, are we just gonna still pay a bunch of overtime? to
Nope,
people
that's the
that
new
hire?
hires.
We're gonna promote the next person in line. And the next person in line will fill that position. And
Yes,
they'll
but
be
then-
working on patrol, but then she keeps her union position. Okay, so someday she'll be able to still have union.
So what happens if we don't have an opening for 4 years? She's gonna keep union position for 4 years.
We won't promote her until there's a position and she's the first in line to take it. The
In
same
other words,
with-
the union position, the transition union position does not come into effect until a patrol position becomes open and,
Well, and this, I
go
guess,
ahead, sorry.
no, this answers my next question. I understand what you're saying, how it holds a position. What's the fiscal impact of this policy gonna be over 2 years? What's this gonna cost us to hold these 3 positions?
Paul looked into it, I talked to him about it before the meeting. It's $5,200 each.
Per year? Or total, or, I mean, because
If
we're
they
looking at
make
a
it the whole
2-year process.
$5,200 because, and it's hard to figure, it actually could be less than that. If a sergeant takes it, they take a $3.50 pay cut to go into the union. So you actually kind of save money, but in essence, we're probably gonna promote somebody else to sergeant, so in time, it's gonna make up for it. But the union pay versus non-union pay is $5,200 a year. And we're gonna phase those out as quickly as we can after the new jail is open. The other thing, remember, we talk about these officers and how are we gonna have them, it's not like they're gonna be sitting around all the time, but we have to, we started already, right? We're building up our jailers so that we have enough people to fill the jail once it's open. So as we're building up, we don't have that many duties that they have to do now in our current jail. So we want to assign them on the transition team instead of sitting around and having people tripping over each other on our current jail as we ramp up people. We want to assign them on the transitional team and give them as many duties over there as they can, because that way we keep both things busy and we're more prepared for when it opens. Before the jail is done, we have to hire 5 new people, 5 additional staff than we have now. So we don't want those 5 additional staff sitting around their jail doing nothing. We want a transitional team that's preparing that new
Yes,
jail.
you're gonna have 5 additional staff working on a building that doesn't even have the foundation laid or has the foundation laid. And doesn't Supervisor Rondon,
No,
That's
I
not-
get what you're saying. You're not gonna have them, you're not hiring, we're taking up positions and we're getting her to train. She still has her position, she's still doing her job and she might do it.
Right.
It's sometimes she's gonna float over.
Correct.
And then if she doesn't want that job someday, she can go back to that other position, correct?
Well, she's not even going back.
Right.
She just stays where
Right,
she
she
is.
stays where she's at. And the union is that between union or non-union is the,
But during the time of the transition, you have three positions for 2-year period.
they're not you're asking, you're not hiring somebody, you're taking
No,
a
but we're
person.
gonna pay them.
We're going to
Right.
be paid.
Yeah.
But only once and not even once the need arises, they might actually be working in the transitional team environment. So we're already getting what we're asking of them, right? It's only when these upcoming retirements come and then you get a patrol opening. It's only then that this triggers. And again, it may not be 3, it may only be 2. It all depends on who's where. All right, but we're
And
just
it may
trying
not
to
be
set the
2 years, it may be a year.
Exactly.
Let me explain one more. It's easier to understand people. So Shane Johnson applied for the transitional team. He comes from Brown County. He brings a lot to the table. And we would likely want him, he would be a good candidate for the transitional team. He had his interview and I asked him, okay, there's probably about 4 people ahead of him. He's about 5th in seniority wise, if everybody above him wants to go to the union. And we know that we might have 5 retirements in the next 2 years. So I asked him, okay, if we have 5 retirements, are you still going to stay on the transitional team if you know that you might have to pass up a patrol position? And he said, absolutely not. Then I'll have to pass on the transitional team. So he would be one that probably, if this even affected, that's why we want up to 3 positions. We're not going to promote him early because we think, oh, that'll create another union position. We're going to promote Shane above everybody in front of him and get everybody else mad. No, just if Shane came in within the time when this is being built and he's on the transitional team and he's our best candidate to go to patrol, we would make him a union position and he would save that seniority and then we would promote somebody else. So they would actually work patrol before him. That way he would stay on the transitional team. Does that make sense? The transitional team, if you debate that, you're gonna have
I think we
problems.
understand it, but it's
You might not like it, but Nancy's gonna come in and say, you have to have a transitional team. This is part of the jail
Well, she
process.
can
It
come in
absolutely
and tell
has
us
to be.
what she wants. In the end, we're going to approve what we approve.
But I'm just telling you, she's gonna tell you a transitional team is something you really need if you want a jail to open and be able to operate on time and efficient. Anyway.
Well, we were told a lot of things that just couldn't be done any differently along the way. They have all proven true.
I still have a question about using Sergeant Anna, or Sergeant Dean.
Yep.
She's not in the union right now,
Correct.
so she'd go on the transition team,
Correct.
but at some point, and she has the most seniority now, that would be able to transfer to patrol if she wanted to.
Correct.
So, okay, a patrol position open, she's on the transition team. She says, I want to go on patrol. What happens to her position on this seniority team?
Which is why we're asking for this, because if she wants to go on patrol, but she's already agreed to help us, knowing that these pieces were in place, she's going to stay on the transitional team. Basically, we're going to cue her. We're going to say, yes, you acknowledge that you want to be on patrol. We're going to hold that. We're going to be in queue as far as seniority. But now, being that she's willing to stay in transitional, the next person will then be given the chance to go on patrol. But she hasn't lost her place. It's all about, and you understand unions, that it's a matter of making sure they stay within the queue. And that's all we're doing is even then we bring the next person. But when Chelsea's done, when she's done what we've asked her to do, then she's going to fall right back into where she would have been. And she won't be hindered because of her willingness to help us. That's the crux of this whole
So
conversation.
what happens to the person that's the patrol officer?
Well, we've got 5 retirements. We know we have a series of retirements, but
Maybe.
right, but if it didn't,
Anything.
then they would transition back. We've done that in the past. This isn't the first time we've taken somebody and said, hey, things have changed. You got to go back in the jail. Those things happen. So if it weren't to, if through attrition, this position, that wouldn't be there. Yeah, then they would just flip. Because again, Chelsea was willing to help us. We're going to then just guarantee her that spot. It's not a new position. It's not forever. It's just a mechanism by which to help these people in helping us.
So why would you need 3 new union positions?
3 of these, again, these are not union, well, these are just, union designation for existing staff. Because we've got the next 3, and if they're the senior ones that are going to help us on the transitional team, they're the next 3 potentially that could transition. All we're using those union designations to hold their place. So that if others leapfrog, because we got to fill patrol, but they're willing to stay behind and do jail, we're just holding queue. And then when things transition, if there's, because of retirement, they'll fall right back in, and that person that was put ahead of them, they'll still be in patrol. But when we look at the roster, these folks are willing to help us stay in their place in the roster, and they're not down at the bottom now because they're willing to help us. So it's, you know, instead of using the word position, we're talking about designation, where they would fall in the roster, and we want to give them that so that they're more, so that they can assist us in this.
Do we know who we want on the transition team yet? And of those people, do we know if some of them are gonna stay jailer dispatchers with no intentions of ever going to patrol? That they don't have the training or anything like that?
We don't know who we want yet. We posted for the first time, and right away in the interviews, it became clear that no, we have to know the answer to this before people will even accept it. And once they found out that we were trying to hold places in the union, then we had more interest also. Because people thought, I'm not taking that, losing my chance to go to patrol, but now we are able to do this.
If I may,
We don't know.
if I may, Mr. Chair and committee, if it please the committee, how about, again, we continue to have this discussion, but we'll ask the jail inspector come, and then what may be helpful, because I'm thinking about this, is I'll work with the sheriff's staff to kind of create a visual as to the movement and how that works from a placement standpoint. And that might be a little bit more easy to understand than from a verbal standpoint, because I'm thinking of it as, and maybe meat counter is not the best way, but serving number 1, serving number 3 type of thing, where actually a person has 2 different tags, in that I'm seeing where the jail sergeant is number 1 to get that union position in patrol. But they will not be the first one to go into patrol because they're helping with the transition. But they have that number 1 tag that when the transition is all over, when the next spot comes open, they get to move into that, but they get to jump farther ahead of the line because they have the number 1 tag. And I can see with some of the things is this is hard to understand, and I want to create a visual that will make that easier to understand.
I understand it, but that's why you don't foresee anybody from patrol coming off patrol to go on the jail transition team.
That's the other thing. We did offer that up, and we had a lot of people from patrol apply. And we're not eliminating somebody from patrol and saying we wouldn't put them on the transition team. We wouldn't be able to do 3 from patrol, you know, or we'd have to do 3 union positions right off the bat. And we don't really want that. We don't want to give the impression that patrol people know more than jail either, or something like that. They don't. And we have a lot of really good quality people in the jail that bring a lot to the table. So, and if somebody from patrol does get it, we have a cross-trained officer right now that fills in for patrol whenever somebody goes out on FMLA or something like that. And we could utilize that person when that patrol officer is working on the transitional team. That's one of the scenarios we have now already.
I understand what you're trying to do. I just don't like the terminology about union positions.
I guess I would like to see, in addition to the union contract, some kind of amendment or rider onto it, explaining the whole process. 2 years from now, you could have a whole new board sitting here and nobody knowing what's happened.
And
We did.
if I may, Jason, just for a moment, because the chair did send an email asking about, you know, a letter from the union. And part of the reason that we haven't approached the union yet is because we don't have unanimity here yet. So to a certain degree that the union wouldn't know necessarily what they're agreeing to because we have, but ultimately as the employer, we would be making the request to the union.
Didn't this go out before the meeting?
It did.
The letter, this explains everything we're talking about, the letter that went out before the meeting. And the union has agreed to it in essence, but the union doesn't really have a say in that. We're creating these new positions and then we're talking about eliminating them after the jail is built. The union would tell you, you can eliminate positions anytime you want. We don't have say in that.
Yeah.
So this letter, I mean, I think we should get buy-in from them and have them sign off on it, but it's important that you as a committee okay it first, and then we get it to the union, and they're just basically gonna say, yeah, we understand what you want to do.
So they've already agreed to it. So if there's confusion there, they've already agreed to it, right? They've agreed to everything they can agree to. They're not gonna set terms and limits. They've already agreed to it. But we, out of respect for this group, wanted you to have eyes on this, to say, well, this is, we want this to look totally different. In essence, everything we've explained, the union's on board with. That's what's important. But we didn't want to necessarily finalize it because then we thought out of respect for this group, that should be the first one. So if there's an agreement that, okay, we understand the spirit in which this is being done, now let's look at the details, absolutely. But we just felt it was respect out of this group. So we're not trying to put the, cart before the horse or anything, but they're already aware of it. They voted on it with union membership and they're in favor of this as what we're proposing. It's up to this group to decide those more details. So we're just trying to respect both sides of the party.
Other questions?
Money's in the budget, right? Yeah, wasn't it 600,000?
Sustainable.
We have one.
Oh, it was in the budget, it's
Yeah.
$600,000
We got money.
for training. We only have one cross-trained union position in the jail.
Correct.
Yes. And we're asking to expand that to 3 until the transition team is over and then go back to 1.
If you have one in-
We actually requested 2. We only need 2, but we're just in case. I mean, it costs us nothing. It costs us nothing to have the 3rd, right? Otherwise, we got to trip over ourselves going through this all over again. So we're saying, in spirit, we're saying 3. We may only need 2. It all depends on who steps up and where all these pieces fall, right? We're just trying to look downstream at possible icebergs. That's what leaders do. We try to forecast things that could be an impediment down the road. All right, to just put up the blinders and say, let's just hope for the best or hope we get whoever we get. All right, that's inviting failure. So we're just trying to create the environment by which we get the best possible people on this transitional team and give them a mechanism by which we're not hindering their career because they were willing to help us. It's just a matter of general decency.
And they're asking for a 2-person transition.
Typically, that's what it is. But again, we may only need 2, depending on who's in there. We may not need that 3rd one because they may already have protected status. So it all depends on who we put on there. Again, we don't want to front load it with all patrols. That's kind of, first of all, we may have 1 or 2 that have enough frequency that have been there, that transition recently that will have some solid memory and understanding. And we're not going to take somebody that's been on the road for 15 years and expect them to do due diligence in a jail setting, right? So, but there may be 1 or 2 that are recent enough to say, yeah, they may have some valuable input, but potentially they're going to come from the jail because they've got the boots on ground, hands in the, they understand what's going on and what needs to happen. And as you said, Scott, really, it's part of the project. When we budgeted this, we all knew this, which is why we were talking about, how we were going to transition the new hires and how we had to pull them off the transitional team. This isn't anything new. It's just because of our dynamics, this came up that we want to make sure we give these folks some sense of courtesy to be able to help us out in the next 2 to 3 years.
We appreciate all the questions and the sheet does explain a lot of what we talked about. I know it's a hard conceptual thing to get across, and that's why we use people when we explain it.
Other questions? All right, what's the desire of the committee?
I would motion to go on with the temporary cross training. You won't offer union positions until they're actually.
And if one comes, we're department heads. We aren't gonna, if one comes 3 months before the jail is finished, we'll find a way not to make another union position for that. We will run one short for 3 months. It just depends when they come and how early.
Plus they have to come to me.
There you go.
So we're not gonna just automatically get free as quickly as we can. Not by any means, it's just when they fall.
Maybe I didn't catch this, but you said it was, Dr. Paul, it was $5,200 a position. What does that $5,200 cover?
Retirement basically is what the big difference is. Union positions pay 7% more in retirement. And then he had a couple other real minor things, but he said the vast majority of it was the retirement. I think there's
Just wait, there's some discussion.
All right, there's a motion.
No,
Is there
I'm
a
sorry,
second?
it's just, I knew there was some discussion, so I was letting there be discussion before I let Jason finish up. So go ahead, continue to finish up, Jason.
And I was just finishing up, but the vast majority is the retirement, and then there's very small other things Paul said. But like 90% of it is that 7% retirement difference.
Basically comes down to the contributions. When you look at the salary
State
spreadsheets, it's all the different contributions of the difference between protected, not protected. That's where most
I
of it
understand that, but I don't understand where this extra 5,200, if you're not creating any new union positions, why do we need extra money?
Well, what is happening, you're going from what would be a non-union position to a union position, even though temporarily. And therefore, with the union position, the county provides an additional.
You said we're going from a non-union to a union position.
So
So now you're
Temporarily.
telling me that if it takes 4 years to find a union position, we're gonna pay this person union wages for 4 years?
No. No, this is only
Am I
during,
missing something?
yeah,
here?
so only
What am I
during this,
missing?
so we look at the project, right? It's not gonna trigger or kick off until somebody from patrol retires. So even though we stand up the transitional team with these individuals, they're still operating as non-protected, as non-union. But all of a sudden, a patrol position opens up and they want to take it, then we're gonna say, okay, you have the right to take it, right? They want to promote or they want to move their career forward. You're willing, so we're gonna redesignate you as protected so you can hold that spot. They're gonna stay in whatever they were doing at the time, working through transition. So we're actually getting resources out of them. We're getting what we're asking of them already, but it's only until those patrol positions open up. And the first one will say, yeah, I want that one. So that's one. And then, okay, so now we've only provided for the first one. Now let's say another year goes by or 6 months go by and the next person retires on patrol. Now that next person on the transition team may say, hey, I'm next up. Great. Okay, we're going to redesignate you. You're in queue. Okay. And then once the transitional team's done, then they're just gonna go away by attrition, right? Because then as other ones retire, which we know we're gonna have more, then we're not gonna create anymore. Those will end. So it has a start point and an end point.
I get your
But
point.
what you're telling me, you told me before that if just using Sergeant Dean for an
Yeah.
example, her ambition is to get on patrol, but she's gonna help you on the transition team. So there's a position open, but she says, well, I'm not gonna take it right now.
Correct.
So then you guys find someone to fill that position, right?
Right.
Okay, now this continues down the road. In the interim, if another position doesn't open up in 3 years, are we still paying Sergeant Anai union wage for 3 more years?
Chelsea Dean, you mean? No.
Chelsea Dean,
No.
whatever.
So what would happen then is if all of a sudden the cross training is done, then the next opening that opens, and it's not going to be 5 years. And we know this is played out. You saw the matrix. We're going to be dropping people like flies in the next 2 to 3 years through retirements. She'll fall into that next retirement, right? Or if it wasn't, we take whoever was behind her in queue, they would fall back and she would take that spot. So either way, we're not just going to hold on to somebody and perpetually continue these protected designations.
I know what you're saying, Supervisor Ron, and what your fear is, and let's go
No,
to
it's not a
the,
fear. I'm just trying to understand
Right.
how this is gonna work.
And that's why
To me, it doesn't make any sense.
I'll do a graphic. I know what you're saying. I know exactly what you're saying. I'm sorry.
All right. No question.
At the end of the transitional period, if Chelsea wants to be a patrol officer, that $5,200 should end till the next position opens. Because like Tom says, if it takes 3.5 years for a position open, we're gonna pay that $5,200 for the next 3.5 years. I understand what you're saying, that there may be multiple retirements, but we can't really depend on that. So is that $5,200 gonna end at the end of the transition period? Or are we gonna continue to pay her for X amount of years?
If she's in queue.
I
and
understand that
senior,
she's in queue.
Yeah.
If it's 3.5 years before somebody retires, are we gonna pay her $5,200 for 3.5 years?
What I envision is that whoever was the last to promote in will promote back out.
So
Let
let's,
me have that ability to do that.
if I'm understanding your question, Supervisor Augustine, so let's say the jail has now opened and that there is 3 people on transition that could move to patrol. Let's make it all 3. But we have 3 people.
No, they can't move to patrol. because
Well, wait,
patrol's full.
Right, patrol is full. But what would happen is, because those 3 people have their ticket,
Yep.
they go to patrol and those bottom 3 go back down.
You're in the union.
temporarily.
All the three that were on patrol for 3 years,
Ours go
3
back to
years,
jail.
Correct,
Yes. In the union.
and they would drop out of the union?
correct. Because again, understand that the way you designate union is by duty. So if they're no longer doing the duties of patrol, they no longer classify as protected. This isn't like some secret magic syrup.
Right.
This is
They're
all
now going back to
self-enforced
the
by law.
jail, so they are no longer union employees.
What you're doing is if she would come aboard and that position would open as a deputy, she's getting that incentive of that she's not gonna lose that position, the 5,200, but then she has to, she'll go back out.
That's why I understood the fear. You're worried that we have 3
And so
people
she's
on
getting that
transition,
5,200
and
because
it's all
she can't
filled.
take that position.
Well, we've now just
So she's
magically.
getting
Now we gotta
Three.
wait for 3 more
Yeah.
people to retire. We
Nope.
don't, we kick
Right.
those 3 off the
Right.
bottom of the totem.
Bingo. Bingo.
Without, I mean, why would somebody take patrol as saying in 3 years, I'm gonna lose my spot? I could.
Well, they're not
Because-
losing their spot because then when the next position opens,
Right.
they'll fall right back in. So let's say they were, instead of, 1, 2, and 3, they were 3, 4, and 5, right? Yeah, they're gonna be brought back, but then as ones open up, number 3 jumps back in, number 4. So they're not losing their spot. They knew from the get-go where they stood. They knew full well that they weren't actually number 1. They were just given the luxury to jump ahead, knowing that there's potential there to jump back.
And,
this- yeah.
and in that same respect, it would have been worse off if they would have never gotten the patrol position because those 3 would have went to patrol.
And again, this isn't anything secret. This is by statute, right? This is what happened how many years ago when you took protective away from the jailers? Because you said they do not fit the requirements for 51% of their duties. So once we pulled them back off of patrol, they would no longer fit the 51% rule, and they then would fall back into not protective or
Boy,
general
I'm
status.
thinking back to all these conversations we had during the union negotiations and, just trying to maintain harmony among the membership and all that. Boy, it sure doesn't sound like it now.
Oh, it will. Again, as long as they know going into it, right? That's all, that's the big thing. There's no surprises. They understand going in, all right, you understand that you're leapfrogging in front of Chelsea, and they'll know that, absolutely. So understand that when that day comes, and she's now ready to, to take her rightful place, they're gonna understand, okay, I gotta back off now. And this, again, this is not new to the sheriff's department, right? We communicate things well, people understand, and they ebb and they flow. This isn't anything new for us.
That's sort of like somebody that takes days because somebody else doesn't want it. They leapfrog ahead of them in days, but they know every year they can get bumped out, and it happens. They all of a sudden get bumped from days, now I gotta go back to thirds. Because somebody with more seniority than me passed it up for a couple of years, but now they want it, and I get bumped. It's kind of like that. I take patrol. The other thing they got going for them, if they take patrol and they work it for a year and they do good, obviously, we're gonna want to promote that person again. So they're gonna be the next one to go.
This seniority aspect in the union contract, though, that covers this transitioning. If I said, I'm gonna stay on nights, but then all of a sudden I wanna go on days, I could bump somebody because they have more seniority, right?
At bidding,
Once a year.
Yeah.
You can't bid them you can't bump them in the middle. of
Okay, the
year.
jailer dispatch people, they don't have any of this seniority stuff or
Right.
anything.
correct.
So they're kind of an employee at will, if you will.
The general employees, yeah.
So why are we trying to create union positions in a classification that doesn't have any union privileges right now?
Absolutely, because they're willing to assist us in this transitional team effort, right? So it's a matter of they're willing to help us out and we're willing to help them in that we don't, which I'm looking for,
They don't leave us in the lurch. from
yeah, we're not
transition
screwing up their
perspective.
future
I
career
know,
goals.
I know.
So you're right, it's a give and take.
So isn't there something in your own policy at the sheriff's department under jailer dispatcher that you could have a policy written saying that if you help us on the transition but want to go on patrol, some jailer that goes on and takes a position that's open then could get bumped? What does that have to do with the union?
That's everything.
The union wouldn't allow that. They wouldn't allow, okay, the bottom union person, we'll allow that person to get bumped by somebody in the jail who's not even in the union coming in and bumping them, because that's the rule they have at the sheriff's department. The union would say, no, we represent our union people. And once you're in our union, we're gonna represent you and you're gonna follow the
So
rules.
if somebody goes into the union because somebody wants to stay on the transition team, the union is not going to protect that person when you guys say, you got to get out because this person, we promised that job. I don't
Absolutely, that's
understand.
part of
Comes
the
open for
MOU.
bidding.
Right,
It comes open for bidding. We have that written in here,
Right.
that when the transition team is done, they can bid for those shifts on patrol with their union seniority. Similar to where you would bump somebody out of days if you were on thirds and you had seniority over the person on days. You might pass it up 1 year, but you might take it the next.
I guess this is too confusing for me.
That's why I'll try to do it. I'll try to do it graphic to make it
I
easier.
think I get the gist of it, but I would like some more clarification, maybe something signed by the union.
But we should okay it before we get it to the union. You know what I mean?
Well,
If you want this
Because if we
signed by
don't
the
okay
union.
anything, I mean, then you don't get nothing, right? I said, if we don't okay anything, then you guys don't get nothing. I
So you
mean,
want it signed by the union first?
why would?
I think I would like to see something
The
that.
the explanation of how it works,
Yeah.
So this document signed, because this is basically the explanation of how it works, but we could have them sign it.
I mean, that's my thoughts. I don't know what the rest of
And again,
I mean,
we've got time.
I'm
We've got
understand,
time
I
if you want
wasn't,
You guys to be comfortable with this.
I wasn't understanding the bump process, that once you were a patrol officer, they could bump you back out of the non-union, put you back.
We can
in.
do that, but to like Tom's point, we can't through our policy bump somebody into the union, right? It's very different that way, right? If
I
someone's
don't
in the
understand
union, yeah, they can retract back because last one in, first one out, right? That kind of mentality. But we can't dictate through policy who's gonna go in and who's gonna go out. That again is set by statute in regards to duties and 51% of the duties. So if we say you are now going back into jail, they no longer perform 51% of the law enforcement duties, that's where it happens, right? So we're trying to stay on solid ground from all perspectives. So to Tom's point, yeah, there is no way that I can as sheriff try to force feed a union contract or their protocol. We've got to, there's got to be that mutual respect both ways.
Mr. Chair, there's just for parliamentary standpoint, there is a motion by Supervisor Yankee to fill the 3 temporary cross-trained union positions.
Supervisor Yankee, you got your motion. Is there a second to it? No second. Motion dies. All right, so what is the what is the committee going to want to do then going forward?
If we could get that, I can sign like Aaron said, I would like to see that and then bring it back.
Absolutely. And if you think of anything after the meeting, let us know. We're willing to put together any, like that Scott said, any sort of documents, anything that will visually flow better, because it's complicated. We live in it, we live in this day in and day out, so, we get it. So we're not trying to
My
overwhelm.
concern is, that this part can change next election. You could have a whole different part of body sitting here. I mean, I think something that's on black and white that we can see what's going on and understand it.
So with the
I think
union-
it's complicated.
Well, you're absolutely right, Gary. In fact, anything we do, I mean, that's been standard protocol for decades, regardless of boards, is you always have to have an MOU. If you're going to digress or, we don't say detour from anything in that contract, we have to have an MOU. That's what this is. But if you're comfortable with it being signed, that's what this is a document that then lasts after I'm gone or you're gone or whoever's gone to say, okay, this was what was agreed upon until this jail is built. So absolutely, we can document that.
I would
Great
make a-
conversation.
I would
Great
make a
conversation.
motion to have the temporary cross-trained union positions signed by the union and then come back and bring it back to the board. Does that make sense?
Yeah, or the committee can just direct staff to do that. You don't have to do a motion if you don't want to, Supervisor Augustine. You can just, I think we've gotten the clear direction from this committee is this is what you would like.
That's fine. Yeah, we don't need a motion.
So we're not going to have a motion on that. You're going to be sending a motion.
What was your?
Is that the committee has direct administration, what their intent is that they want a letter and they want it signed by the union.
Is that correct? Is that the desire of the committee? Okay.
I can rescind my motion. And then say that's desired.
I was just gonna be knowing that you didn't make a motion.
Well,
You want to rescind your, if you
You
want to
oh,
withdraw
sure,
your
fine, now I
motion.
gotta be more than.
Sort of made a motion already.
At least then there's that documentation.
Just one for clarification, if this goes through and you get these union positions, temporary union positions, that $5,200 per position, that's, as you would say, number one in line, that that's, we have to pay that 5,200?
Yeah, if they're in a union position, you have to, by statute, you're putting in the extra, the retirement match, which is not 12 point, which isn't 13.2, it's 18.7 or something like that. So yes, the county would have to put in the extra retirement because they are a union position.
But again, understanding that even though we're gonna kick off this transitional team at some point, that doesn't automatically engage this, right? This is only engaged once these patrol positions start to open up and there is the desire for these folks to then go on those. So it is, it's very flexible. It may not be 3, it may only be 2, depending on who's on the transition team. We're just trying to set the pieces in place so that we can be effective when we head down this path.
Alright. Is that clear? No.
There's much.
So
Well,
the jail is-
like I said, I will talk with Nancy and hopefully she can come to the December 5th meeting. I'll ply her with food and beverage. And then we'll try to have other documents to help it to both from a time process as well as from a, what I would call position shifting process. This person goes, so the chess piece is moving. So that way it kind of helps to explain that process and the different scenarios. What happens if the jail has now opened and those transition people are still there? Do those move down? If they have opened at a certain time, then we can do. So I'll give some of those different scenarios as well.
If you can convince me that once I'm in the union and I'm going to voluntarily leave, so somebody else can get in.
Again, that's all about communication. We do this in other realms, as Jason said. So then somebody's thinking, man, I'm only been here a year and I'm on days, right? But they know full well, right? Again, because we're communicating, hey, be grateful that you're on days because at any moment, right? You go back third, same thing here. Hey, be grateful that Chelsea is helping us because that now gave you the opportunity to go on patrol prematurely, but you understand that if this plays out a certain way, you may end up back right in your previous position. So it's all about communicating ahead of time so that we set the expectation.
And
That's all it
you said you're opening it up for, and people, anybody can come in to try out.
There could be patrol folks that could do it.
Yeah, remembering, you have 20 people and 3 people come or 5 people come, well, if they didn't come to sign up for it, that's, right? They took on, okay.
All right.
Awesome. No, great question. Thank you, everyone.
That's what the union negotiator said. Just trying to maintain harmony among the membership.
And we do, we've got great harmony. And a lot of that, again, always comes down to effective communication, making sure that we're clear and honest right from the get-go. Impeccable. Yep, impeccable communication, as Scott would say. So, we have very few problems with the union for that reason. It's when there's that not understanding. So just like we want to be clear to you folks, we always want to be clear with the union. It's no different.
All right, let's move on. Next meeting, December 5th. 6 o'clock. All right, a little sooner. How much is a little sooner? 5 o'clock? 5:58, 5:59.
5 o'clock or 5:30. Would work 5 o'clock?
All right.
I think 5 o'clock would probably be more amenable for the jail inspector as well. But again, as the committee pleases.
5 works for me that day. It's just a few short turnaround. That works for everyone? 5 o'clock. 5 o'clock, December 5th. All right, let's have a motion to adjourn.